Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker-Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Today I have with me Patricia Sullivan, the author of Overland Before the Hippie Trail, Kathmandu and Beyond with a Van, a Man, and No Plan. Tricia, welcome.
Thank you, Becky.
You spent a lot of time on the road. Can you tell us, how long did you wait before you started to put your travel story into a manuscript with the idea of publishing it?
Well, it actually started back in 2009 when I had moved to Berkeley, didn't know anybody. I just retired. Well, I knew my daughter here, her family. Just retired, boxes all over the house, and including boxes that had these journals in them. And a few months after that, I got breast cancer and was stuck in the house for a whole year with chemo, radiation, surgery, all of those things. And the end of that, which was the end of 2008, I thought, I've got to change my life. I've got to do something. I've got to turn over a new leaf.
Yeah.
And at that point, I pulled out. I said, in January, I'm going to start something new. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started going through reading for the first time all the journals that I had kept, the trip log I had kept, the photographs, and the letters that both my husband Mick and I had written.
Yeah. And
I wanted to just put them in order, just make a sense of those 2 years that had happened 50 years earlier.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and that took me about 5 years.
Wow.
I was doing other things. It was not full-time.
Yeah.
But in 2015, I did publish. Well, I didn't publish, but I put together a manuscript in book form.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew this was way too much. I put everything in there.
Oh, wow.
Every day, everybody we saw, everything I could think of and everything I read about. Not just think of, but the things I had written down.
Yeah.
And I knew it was way too much for anybody except maybe my kids, maybe my grandkids, and maybe not even them.
Yeah.
Then when it really started was COVID, 2020.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Being in the house, I thought, okay, this is the time that I can go through the book and try to make it something more interesting for people besides my family.
Yeah. Did you find as you were going through the journals and photos and everything that you started to remember more about the moments that happened that you hadn't maybe specifically written down, but because you lived that experience, did you find that it stirred up a lot of memories along the way?
It did, exactly. And not only with me, but my husband, who I'm still with, I had not read the journals either, but I would say something to him like, oh, do you remember I wrote about that we were in this place and did this thing? And he would say sometimes, oh, yeah, and I remember this.
Oh, yeah.
So together we had some good conversations and that he remembered things I didn't remember and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I didn't put all those in because I wanted to stick mostly to the data, but it did the data that had been written.
Yeah.
But yes, it did remind me of a lot, and I was able to put more emotion into it.
Oh,
by
nice.
talking about it.
Yeah.
During that process.
Wow. And how many journals are we talking about? I mean, I know it was a long period of time, so it was about 2 years, right? But
it was 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, I kept a journal every few days, and Mick also kept a journal every few days. So each had one or a couple of books worth.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing that I ended up relying on was my trip log, which is one book. And every single day I wrote in that book what the day was, where we slept, where we ate, or what we bought, or including like stamps. Or, I mean, I was down to the penny.
Wow. Wow.
And I translated it all into American money, even though we were using all kinds of different money. But to keep it consistent, I translated it to American money. So I have some things. Oh, this cost 12 cents. Or this day we spent $5. That was a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But when I read that daily journal, I could remember more than just reading. The trick log let me see and remember the days more clearly than the journals.
Now, when you started out, when you first headed off, did you, and started writing this travel log, did you have, what was your intention, since you were so diligent? What was your intention in keeping such a precise log?
I didn't start out with the intention of writing a book at all. I think I grew up with my mother keeping journals, my grandmother keeping journals, reading. I started keeping a journal when I was about 12. So I think it's just something I like to do. It helped me remember. And why I began so detailed in this, I'm really not sure. Yeah. But I'd like to keep records.
Yeah.
I guess that's...
I think that's great. I also think it's great that you and Mick that you're still together, that your relationship is strong after the challenges and joys of this kind of living on the move with very few things. We get so used to having things in this world, right?
Right.
And that here you are 60 years together, I think is what you'd said, right?
Yeah, from 65. We got married in 1965.
Yeah. Yeah.
So close to that.
That's inspiring in itself. That's great.
Well, I guess it is kind of unusual.
Yeah.
I have some friends that are also been married this long that have traveled.
So
yes, it's nice to have a partner.
Yeah.
That goes back that many years. We can remember things that happened back in the 60s.
Yeah. Would you say that the travel experience in those early years in your marriage strengthened your relationship?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We had dated for several years in college, but as my daughter said, "You mean, Mom, you didn't even live together?" And no, back in the 60s, we had not lived together.
Right.
We set out on this trip in 1965, 6 weeks after getting married. And I thought I knew him, but I didn't. I hadn't lived with him.
Yeah.
Wasn't quite a partner. But over those couple of years, yes.
Yeah.
We were, as I said in one of my letters, we were rarely out of arm's reach for basically those 2 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Sitting mostly in the car, in the van, or wherever we were traveling. Yeah. So yeah, we had a few rough moments in the beginning, just trying to get used to each other.
Sure.
But then we became very, very close.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about some of the sort of the details of your book. Tell us a little bit more about the title, if you would.
The title took me months and months. I went through a lot of titles, but I ended up with this title that I'm happy with because it says all the main things. The word Overland, yes, we were in a van. A lot of people travel by plane most of the time now in Europe, in Asia, but this was all the time in a van. Before the Hippie Trail was important because the Hippie Trail was basically during the 1970s and mostly involved going to Nepal or India for the drugs, for nirvana, for the adventure. I didn't know anything about drugs, and I didn't come across drugs. I mean, there was hashish along the way, but I didn't know it. And the Kathmandu and beyond is important because Kathmandu was a center point of where we were traveling, where we sold the car. We didn't sell the car in Kathmandu. We sold it in Kabul, Afghanistan. But from Kathmandu on, we were in public transportation, which changed the travel completely from being in our own van and deciding where we would sleep and where we would drive, what road we'd take. All of that stopped once we sold the car. So it was completely different travel when we went beyond Kathmandu to the rest of India and Southeast Asia and East Asia.
Yeah.
And then the van, the man, and no plan. Actually, it was my daughter-in-law who said, this is it, a van and she said a little bit differently. I changed it somewhat, but I thought, yeah, okay, there's a van. And some people say, why isn't it called a van, and no plan? But this is not about a man. I wanted to make sure that there was a man. But it was basically that we had our van. We were together and we were traveling without any real idea of where we were going.
Yeah. That's a nice distinction that you made there in terms of the, what your focus on the book was and how your subtitle, just that little bit of arranging of the words, makes a difference in how we might think about it. Yeah, so that's brilliant. Tell me a little bit about the cover image. Well,
the cover, as you've seen, either you've seen the book or listened to it, shows our van. It's our actual van. And the road going off into the distance, which I think is important. There's nothing except barren hillsides, so you can imagine where this van is going. But I took that picture, that's a portion of a larger picture. Off the picture is Mick, and he's standing by the sign that says sea level, and it's above the top of the van. So we're driving, this is in Jordan, we're going down to the Dead Sea, and Mick is up on the top with the sign that says sea level at this point. I took that picture off because I didn't want a man on the cover. I had seen several books about travel, and they've all been by men, about men, and women were secondary. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But I think it would be fun to show the picture that this is really on the way down to the Dead Sea in Jordan.
Yeah, that's great.
Back when I first started the idea of publishing the book, I did think the only way to get something published was to find a company that would publish your book. And I wrote some letters, I made some stabs, I got some responses, but it all seemed it was going to take like 2 years or a long time. And it was a friend of mine who said, do you know about BAPA? And I said, what's BAPA? And she said, you got to go to their meeting. It's next week. And so I did. BAPA is the Bay Area Independent Publishers Association. I could not have published this book without the help of all of the people in BAPA who gave me advice from the very beginning when I didn't really know at all what I was doing. And now I know so much more. But without this, I couldn't have done it. So thanks to the Bay Area Independent Publishers Association for all the help.
And a side note that the website for BAPA is BAIPA.org and meets on Zoom. So it's accessible to people who, whether they're in the Bay Area or not. Let's pause for a moment. We'll be right back.
Getting your memoir into audio can be a delicate process, best treated with a nurturing and supportive approach. Many authors assume that when a memoir is recorded, it needs to be in the author's voice. And while sometimes that is best, it is not always the best option. At Pro Audio Voices, we'll work through that decision with you and support you in the production process, whichever way you choose. If you decide to narrate, we set you up for success with a range of options, from having an audio engineer and director on the line for every recording session, to getting you properly set up for recording on your own. If we hire a professional narrator, we'll make sure the voice is the right fit for you and your memoir. At Pro Audio Voices, your story is important to us. Let's inspire the world together.
Let's talk a little bit about the audiobook aspect of production for you. And so when it came to narration, you had several voices to choose from. And I'm wondering if you can articulate what drew you most to the voices of Margie Valine and Nathan Agan.
Well, I think that Pro Audio did an excellent job, first of all, of going through, I don't know how many voices they did go through, but all of the ones that I was presented, I think it was 6, 7, or 8 for the female voice, they were all good. It was a very, very hard decision to choose one. I listened and listened and listened.
Yeah.
Run it down to like 3, listen some more, because I felt this was very important to not only listen to somebody for like a half an hour, maybe like you might do on a newscast or something, or a short audio, but for maybe 10 hours.
Yeah.
You know, how could I stay with this as a listener? Did I think I could listen to this person for 10 hours?
Mm-hmm.
I have listened to other, not this book, but other podcasts or something. And after a while, I thought, I get tired of that voice. And I thought Margie's was a good one to listen to for that length of time. And she was very comforting, I thought, in her presentation, and yet showed excitement and energy. And Nathan also, there were fewer male voices. And again, it was the same process. Hard to choose, but I liked the enthusiasm that he gave.
Yeah, great.
In his voice.
And so then in reviewing, when it came time to hear your whole story in the voice of Margie and Nathan, but in someone else's voice, how was that for you? I know that can be, it's a question I love to hear, how different authors respond to that. Yeah.
It was terrible. Well, that's not right, quite the word, but it was very hard for me to listen to her and to him saying, I did this, I did that, when I knew that wasn't me and it wasn't my voice and it's someone acting like me. It was kind of a shock to hear it. And first of all, I wanted to think, no, that's not how I would say it, or that's not right. But it wasn't her. It was me thinking that. And I got used to it. Uh-huh. And nobody else knows that.
Yeah.
So
right. The rest of us sounds great. Yeah. No, it's an interesting thing because, of course, our voices are so unique to each of us. And while many people can sound like someone else, there is we even just think about voice recognition systems. Clearly, there are different, we have very unique voices. And even the fact that we hear ourselves differently than other people hear us, because we're hearing our own voices through the bones in our head. And whether it's live like that or in a recording, we think about, when I hear myself recorded, I don't sound like I think I do. So I find it's a really fascinating process and aspect.
Yeah, I am very happy with the way Margie read it. And not that she pretended to be me, but it works.
Yeah. What would you say, is there anything about the process of producing the audiobook in the first place, so just the production process overall, which I believe was new for you? Is anything about that process that stands out to you that you'd like to share?
One thing is that I realized that I'm really glad that I didn't try to do this myself. I didn't realize how hard it would be, how long it would take, not only getting the equipment I didn't have, the microphones, I didn't have a sound, I could not have done it myself, but I didn't know that. I didn't know how many pieces there were to put that would make up this production. So I'm very glad to Pro Audio doing it this way. It was not hard doing it. It made it very easy. Pro Audio made it very easy to work.
So I know when we first chatted about your book before we got into the production aspect, I had asked you this question I'm going to ask now. It's what do you hope readers, listeners will take away from the experience of being with your story?
Well, I hope they have a good adventure. I hope people feel like they've gone on this trip so many years ago and that it kind of unfolds as I take them from Europe all the way through Asia to the end of the continent, to the end of the landmass in Japan. So there's the adventure part, but I also hope that it reminds them what life was like for travelers and for others in the pre-digital age, especially people who hadn't lived in the 60s or the 70s or hadn't traveled at that time, because it was such a different world then, not only for us, but the way we traveled and the countries that we traveled through. There have been so many changes. Of course, there are always changes.
Yeah.
So I hope that people will get a good sense of what the world was like for us then and how kind people were. We were not afraid. I don't remember being afraid, really. Things you hear so much. There's so much othering now of the world, but I didn't feel that. I felt that we were meeting people who were opening up to us as we opened up to them all over the world, whether we had much language or not. So I hope those ideas of the world being open to everybody to learn and meet new people and get a different idea, a new impression of themselves.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Your comment about how we tend to other people as well made. And how can listeners learn more about you and your writing and anything else that you may have to offer?
Well, the main thing would be my website, which is patriciansullivan.com. Got to put the N in there, Patricia N. Sullivan. On the website, there are some photographs of that are in the book.
Uh-huh.
Maybe some photographs that, no, I guess I didn't put any photographs not in the book, though I have many, and a few little things that I've written. One little thing I found as I was looking through old records is my 12-year-old little story about my pet monkey that died, which is one of the first things I remember, one of my first memoirs. And that is because my mother, when I was so sad this little pet died, my mother said, "Why don't you write a story about the life of Judy?" Judy was the name of my monkey. And so I did. So that was my first memoir. And there's a little piece of it on my website.
Nice. Now, I think that you mentioned to me at one point that you have travelers who have reached out to you about their own travels in relation to your book. Is that so?
I was very surprised at this. So many people, and it continues to happen. Just about 2 days ago, again, it happened. This is a friend of a friend. I'm past the friends and to the friends of the friends. And even some unknown people this is a couple from Montana that I don't know, but that ran across this by chance, who say, "I loved your book because it's all the adventures in it and because I did the same thing. I felt the same thing, or I ran across some desert life or meeting people, or whatever it is." They tell me about their adventures and their experiences from maybe the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, anytime.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that this book seems to bring out memories from other people that they have not written. And many people have said to me still, "I wish I had written my stories, but I didn't have the data for one thing. I started out keeping a journal, but I didn't finish it."
Yeah.
And that's the reason I could write this, is that I had kept those journals and those notes. You can't rely on 50-year-old memories.
Right. Oh, yeah. We don't remember things. I also have a lot of experiences and reading journals from when I'm in my 20s or whenever. And I'm so struck by how the ways I remember things differently at this point than if I go back and read. And I was, very enlightening.
It's pretty common.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then what's your aspiration either with this moving forward, or what's next for you, and what are you working on?
Well, I'm working on this audiobook right now.
Yeah.
With you.
Yes.
I'm not planning to write another book, but I may. Well, I don't know if I'll write another book. I might write more incidents from other travel. This book, of course, ends in 1967. I've done a lot of traveling since 1967 with a lot of adventures. And some I have written about, like short stories or short articles. But I may do more of that and bring out more of the experiences in China, for instance, or Vietnam or Turkey.
Yeah, I think that'd be
or other places.
That would be great. I'm sure that a lot of us would love to read about those. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time joining me today. A reminder, so if you'd like to learn more, you can go to patriciansullivan.com. And Tricia, thank you so much for taking this time with me.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you, Pro Audio, for all the work you do. It's great.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.